Sarah had always dreamed of living in a modern, high-tech apartment, and when she finally moved into a sleek, glass tower with an advanced security system, she felt like she was living a dream come true. The apartment's state-of-the-art technology allowed her to monitor every corner of her home remotely, a feature that made her feel both delighted and secure. The first few weeks passed without incident. Sarah enjoyed the contemporary design, the city views, and the ease of controlling lights, the thermostat, and the security system from her smartphone. It seemed like her entire world was now at her fingertips. However, one night, as she was heading to bed, an alert from the security app woke her. The screen displayed a warning, anomaly detected. Sarah rubbed her eyes, dismissing it as a glitch. But curiosity got the better of her, and she tapped on the alert to review the footage. At first, there was nothing unusual in the footage. The living room was bathed in the dim glow of streetlights. Then, as she fast-forwarded through the recording, she saw it, a shadow darting across the screen. She examined it closely, her heart pounding. The shadow's form was indistinct, almost like a dark smear moving rapidly. She attributed it to lighting or a camera malfunction. The next night, the same anomaly reappeared, only this time, the shadow lingered longer, moving and shifting as if inspecting her apartment. Sarah's doubts grew, but she reasoned that the cameras might be picking up interference or insects. Determined to prove the system's faults, she called the tech support team. They assured her that the system was functioning correctly and advised her to reset the cameras. She followed their instructions, but the anomalies continued. Doors began opening on their own, and strange noises, whispers and hurried footsteps echoed through the empty rooms. Her unease grew, but she tried to ignore it. Rational explanations failed. That night, as she reviewed the footage again, something new appeared, a dark, indistinct figure standing in her bedroom. Sarah's heart raced. She cross-checked the time, just after midnight. Her apartment was empty. She hadn't been in the bedroom for hours. Desperate for answers, Sarah reviewed the footage meticulously, searching for clues, but found nothing extraordinary. The figure remained a shadowy silhouette in the corner of the room, unsettling and elusive. She felt as if the walls of her apartment were closing in on her. The next evening, Sarah decided to stay awake and monitor the live feed. As she sipped her coffee, her eyes were glued to the screen. At exactly midnight, she saw it, the figure reappeared, this time more defined. It was a person, but not quite human. Its shape was distorted, with features that were both horrifying and almost inhuman. Her breath caught as the figure drew closer. She could now see its eyes, empty voids that seemed to pull her in. Whispers and echoing voices grew louder, and a chill filled the air. Then, the figure vanished from the screen. Sarah's heart pounded as she looked around. Her apartment was silent, still, but there was tension in the air. The security system's interface flashed an error message, system malfunction. Unable to connect. A cold terror gripped her. She knew she had to leave. Grabbing her keys, she ran to the door, but it was stuck, jammed. Frantically, she tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The lights flickered again, and the room's air grew frigid. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence, a faint, rumbling whisper coming from all directions. "You can't escape," it said. Sarah's eyes darted around, but there was no one there. The whispers grew louder, becoming a frantic chant in her ears. The room was enveloped in a blinding, mysterious light. Sarah saw a new image on the security camera screens, showing her apartment's interior, but in a grotesque, altered state. Doors and windows were slamming shut by themselves, and dark stains were spreading across the walls. At that moment, Sarah realized she was not just a prisoner of her apartment but was discovering the true nature of the place. The apartment seemed to be alive with a malevolent force, which had been revealed only through her modern security system. As she tried to push against the door, the security cameras made it clear that the place was acting like a living entity, trying to ensnare her. Sarah made one last desperate effort, and when she finally managed to open the door, she felt that she was not only escaping physically but also spiritually from the apartment's grasp. She fled outside, but her mind was still reeling from the painful realization that the very technology she had relied on had become her greatest enemy. When Sarah left the apartment, she felt she could never return. She moved on to a new life, but she would always carry with her the dark, mysterious impact of the apartment that had opened a new, unsettling chapter in her life. The bizarre events in Sarah's apartment proved that sometimes even the most advanced technology can reveal truths beyond human understanding, and those truths can be so dark and terrifying that they change a person's life forever. The clock on the wall ticked methodically, each second stretching into eternity. Max was alone in the house, his older brother Jason out for the night. The old house creaked with every whisper of wind, and shadows danced eerily across the walls. It was just past midnight, and Max, only 10 years old, was supposed to be asleep. He had always been a bit scared of the dark, but tonight was different. The usual creaks and groans of the house seemed more pronounced, more deliberate. Max had tried to ignore them, but the more he listened, the more he felt a gnawing unease creeping up his spine. It started with the lights. The hallway lights flickered sporadically, as though a phantom hand was playing with the switches. Max had gotten up from his bed to investigate, his little feet padding silently over the cool floor. He reached the hallway and stared at the lights, which had now stopped flickering, but a cold draft swept through the corridor. He shook his head, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But as he turned to head back to his room, he heard it. A faint, rhythmic thumping coming from downstairs. It was irregular, almost like something, was moving around in the dark. Max's heart raced, and he hesitated at the top of the stairs, his hand gripping the wooden banister for support. The thumping grew louder, more insistent. It was accompanied by soft, unintelligible murmurs. Max's mind raced through a dozen wild scenarios, but he knew he had to check it out. He clutched a flashlight he had found earlier for comfort and started down the stairs. Each step seemed to echo louder than the last, and as Max descended, he noticed the front door was slightly ajar. His breath caught in his throat. He was certain he had locked it before going to bed. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open and shone the flashlight into the darkened living room. The beam swept over furniture and old family photos, but there was no sign of anyone or anything. The thumping had stopped, but now he could hear something else, a soft scraping noise, like nails on a chalkboard, coming from the basement. Max's instincts screamed at him to run, but curiosity, and perhaps a bit of courage, compelled him to investigate further. He made his way to the basement door, which was slightly ajar, the scraping noise growing louder. Max's hand shook as he reached for the door handle. The cold metal sent a shiver up his arm. He hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The basement was pitch dark. Max flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. The bulb must be out. He held the flashlight in front of him and began his descent into the basement. The scraping noise was now accompanied by muffled, guttural whispers. Max's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing dusty old furniture and boxes piled haphazardly. The basement felt oppressive, as if the darkness was alive and pressing in on him. He moved forward, his steps echoing in the empty space. The whispers grew louder, and the scraping sound seemed to be coming from behind a large, old wardrobe in the corner. Max approached it, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it might give him away. He reached for the wardrobe's door, his fingers trembling as he slowly pulled it open. The scraping stopped abruptly, and the basement fell into an eerie silence. Inside the wardrobe was nothing but old clothes and mothballs. Max sighed in relief, but as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange, a small, leather-bound book lying in the corner behind the wardrobe. Curiosity piqued, Max picked up the book. It was ancient, with a faded, cracked cover. He opened it to find pages filled with strange symbols and unsettling drawings. The whispers started again, more frantic this time. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop. Suddenly, Max felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. He spun around, but there was no one there. His flashlight flickered and went out. He was plunged into darkness. Panicked, Max stumbled toward the stairs, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. The scraping noise returned, now right behind him, getting closer with every step. He bolted up the stairs, almost tripping on the last step, and slammed the basement door shut behind him. Gasping for breath, Max leaned against the door, listening. The whispers and scraping ceased, leaving an unsettling silence. He glanced around the house, every shadow now seeming menacing. As he turned to head back to his room, he noticed something chilling. The hallway lights were now on, but the light cast strange, elongated shadows that seemed to move on their own. Max's flashlight lay at the top of the stairs, its beam casting a crooked line across the hallway floor. In the dead of night, alone, Max felt a chilling realization: whatever was in the basement had followed him upstairs. The house was no longer just creaking and groaning, it was alive with an unseen presence, watching him, waiting. Max crawled back into bed, pulling the covers over his head, trying to shut out the world. The thumping had started again, this time coming from inside his room. His eyes squeezed shut, and he prayed for morning to come, hoping that when it did, the horror of the night would fade into just a bad dream. But deep down, he knew that something had changed, and he wasn't sure if he would ever feel safe in his own home again. Suddenly, the thumping stopped. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he dared to peek from under the covers. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and contort in impossible shapes. The door to his room creaked open, and Max's breath hitched. A figure stood in the doorway, a shadowy, indistinct shape that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. It didn't move, but Max could feel its gaze piercing through him. The temperature in the room plummeted, and Max's breath turned to fog. Just as the figure seemed about to advance, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Max's heart nearly stopped as he heard Jason's voice, calling his name. The figure at the door dissipated into the darkness, and the house seemed to exhale a sigh of relief. Jason rushed into the room, his face pale and eyes wide with concern. "Max, are you okay?" "I got here as soon as I could. I felt something was wrong." Max nodded, unable to speak. He clung to his brother, his mind racing. Jason glanced around the room, his gaze landing on the open wardrobe. The leather-bound book lay discarded on the floor. "We need to get out of here," Jason said urgently. "Something's wrong with this house." As they hurried out of the room, Max looked back one last time. The shadows had retreated, but the feeling of dread lingered. They left the house, the night air cool and refreshing against their faces. As they drove away, Max glanced back at the house, its windows dark and silent. The house seemed to watch them, a brooding presence that would remain forever imprinted in Max's mind. He clung to the hope that they had escaped its grasp, but deep down, he knew that the shadows of that night would always haunt him.